And welcome everybody. Just wanted to let people know, in case there's any confusion, that last week's session on the Changemaker curriculum was the first opportunity to hear about it. And you're more than welcome to join again, but you're just going to hear about it again. The difference is I get to moderate this discussion versus our brilliant alum board member Lutfi Siddiqui, and I watched the recording of last week's and I was completely humbled because he talked about really profound things like the radical uncertainty of the times and how the world is now not a puzzle but a mystery, and we have to figure out how to get it to a puzzle so we can piece it together. I think I'm much more basic as an educator, someone who's been an IB educator for nearly a quarter of a century and had the privilege of working at a UWC for 16 years. And that is that I think schools should fundamentally be about experimentation and making things better. And I think UWC has a unique opportunity with our deliberately diverse communities to be a laboratory for learning. And something I have observed as an IB educator over the past quarter century is that the IB is increasingly bureaucratic, and the most precious resource that we have as educators, time, is being taken away with tasks that I don't think lead to better learning outcomes. So part of the desire in coming up with a new curricula was to give time to our students to engage with things that they're profoundly interested in. It was also to move away from a siloed disciplinary approach to education to an interdisciplinary approach to education, but it was ultimately to reclaim the heritage of UWC Atlantic as a radically progressive, innovative school, and to take advantage of our phenomenal faculty who also have passions and interests that go beyond the subjects which they teach within the IB. So at its biggest level, we're completely reimagining education for the 21st century, but we also want to do that working in partnership with sister UWCs and also the IB organization to the best of our ability. So this is sort of our entry point. The Changemaker curricula that we're piloting this year, because we have a unique opportunity to do so, are our first experiments in a new curriculum. We're prepared to fail and we're prepared to learn, and we are working with the students to co-produce these curricula. But they're skills-based, they're interdisciplinary, and they're really taking advantage of the assets of the college. So with that introduction, I'll hand over to Sylvie Verches, who's the team leader for the Changemaker curricula, and she'll talk about that team and her passion.
Thank you, Peter. So just a brief introduction of myself. My name is Sylvie. I'm also a UWC alumna. I graduated from Waterford in 2005, so I have a long history with UWC. I'm in my 7th year teaching at UWC Atlantic, and my main subject is global politics. So this Changemaker curriculum is really something very, very close to what I've always wanted to do. I think even as a student, you know, I had the sense that, yes, the IB was good, but was it really, you know, serving the UWC in a way that got the best out of us, or were there parts of the IB that maybe, you know, were overbearing on us? So I think this, you know, conversation has been a long time coming and has also been ongoing for, you know, several decades now, I think. And we can look back at other initiatives. I know Mahindra College, for instance, had a project-based diploma experiment for a little while. So we're really, you know, building on conversations that have been going on for quite a while. And our aim is not, you know, to throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? We're not aiming to break completely with the IB if that's unnecessary, because we don't need to reinvent things that are good. But the idea is to shape what we have and to make it more fit for our purposes. And what is our purpose? Our purpose is, of course, character education. It's building those interdisciplinary skills, and it's enabling our students to make the most of our multicultural environment, of our physical environment, and aiding them in finding their passion, really, rather than getting bogged down in bureaucracy. So within the Changemaker curriculum, we are currently prototyping 7 units. They are, you know, a bit of sort of, I don't want to say random selection of units, because they're not random, but they sort of arose out of the moment we were in and out of the, you know, people and their expertise who were involved and so on. So these Changemaker units deal with a wide variety of fields, but of course are not completely, you know, exclusive, or, you know, they're not all encompassing, and there's certainly room for more. And so the aim of those Changemaker units is to, you know, get out of the cerebral learning that we, you know, practice so much in our classrooms and really get into action. So it's about, you know, building skills and also building personal attitudes. And so the idea is to collaborate with the IB to create something new and fit for the 21st century. This is not meant to be an add-on to the IB as it currently exists, but it's meant to be an adaptation of the IB. So what that will look like in practice, of course, is still being negotiated. But the idea is that students would do a mixture of traditional IB subjects and those new Changemaker units in a way that, you know, helps them fulfill some sort of capstone project idea that they have. And actually the interest initially that we've got from the IB is very, very positive and very keen. So I think we're at a very good moment in time to pick up on all of those, you know, conversations that have been happening for quite a while. The idea is, you know, to really focus on transferable skills. And you will see that in those 7 units we're currently prototyping, actually a lot of the skills show up repeatedly and they overlap. And they are skills that are useful in a vast variety of contexts. So they include things like project management, field science, design thinking and engineering, public speaking, data science and coding. So really things that can be transferred and that don't just belong into one discipline, but that are, you know, there for practical and for academic things to come to life. And so apart from these skills that we're trying to build, we really also want to focus again on our Hahnian roots in character education. So it's not just about aptitudes, but also attitudes. So we want our students to come out of this with the tools to be, you know, constructively critical. So yes, deconstruct things and criticize things, but then also, you know, turning the mystery into a puzzle that we can make attempts to solve, as Peter put it, right? And we want them to be reflective and mindful. We want them to be team-oriented and, yeah, able to navigate complexity in a way that is constructive, right? So yeah, those really are the aims. So currently, as I said, we have 7 interdisciplinary units under development. I deliberately call them prototypes. They're not pilots yet. Pilot implies that we, you know, are ready to pitch this and to, you know, market this as a product, whereas prototypes, the emphasis is on iteration. A lot of the courses that we have this year are in their very first iteration, so they haven't run before. There are 3 units that are in their second iteration, 2 of which have had significant changes between iterations as well. So it's really about giving us the time and the space to experiment. And in a way, this year was a little bit of a blessing in disguise for the Changemaker curriculum, because it's given us time to look inward, right? A lot of our outreach services at the moment cannot run in their current in the current climate, at least not in their old form. So it's freed up some capacity for us to really focus on this. And we have a large number of students involved. There are over 100 students currently involved in this curriculum development. And it's a massive luxury for us to be able to work this way, because so often curriculum design starts from the top down, right? If we look at the design of national curricula, it starts with criteria and it starts with legislation and it starts with assessment. And then you somehow retrofit the teaching and learning onto it. Whereas we have the wonderful opportunity to start from the ground up and look at topics we are passionate about, interdisciplinary fields that we think are important for the 21st century, experiment with the students and then see, you know, what comes out of that, and developing authentic assessment based on what we've experienced together with the students. So the role of the students is vital here, because of course they are the ones who are, you know, supposed to be our learners. We have the advantage, of course, as we have a very diverse student body, and in selecting our students this year, we made we made a deliberate effort to get a cross section of the AC student populace in every course, so that, you know, the more STEM oriented courses don't just have students who also take physics and math higher and so on. We wanted really students of a variety of backgrounds, be that prior education, culture, ability and fluency in English and so on, because it would be silly to develop something that isn't accessible to everybody. So in the current year, students are taking part in a 2-hour session once a week, and this is taken the part of their service within the CAS program. But of course, in the future, you know, these units would be bigger. There's still a lot to, you know, figure out. You will see some of these units overlap quite significantly as well, so they might morph into one larger course in the end. But the idea is that students would, you know, take probably a combination of units, and that would take the place of 1 or 2 standard level subjects in the end, once we're accredited and so on. Right, so you can see here there's a list of all the 7 units that we have, and basically the plan is every teacher who could make it today and who's here will briefly introduce their unit, and those who can't make it I will cover for them. So yeah, shall we start with big data?
I am here. Hi, so my name's Shan and I'm leading on the big data course. And the idea behind this, I guess, is I was quite interested in computer science, and the IB, of course, has a computer science course, but it didn't really feel like it covered the overlap with lots of other things. And data science is sort of a very current trend, I guess. And there's a lot more, like, universities have got a lot bigger focus on it. And regardless of what subject someone might study, it's becoming a lot more prevalent in everyone's daily life and almost unavoidable at this point. So I wanted to create a course that kind of covered the boundaries between the computer science side, but also the everything else it applies to. So it's designed not just to appeal to sort of our STEM enthusiast students, but also to those who like their social sciences or their politics or their charity and development, kind of any field really where data comes into it, which actually is most fields these days. And so we've selected quite a broad scope of students. So I intentionally chose students for this course that weren't just those who really loved computers, to try and get kind of a breadth of experience. And it's designed to be quite broad, more interdisciplinary. It's focused a bit more on application and context than a pure coding course might be. And also a bit more to kind of UWC ideals, in the sense that we could look at sort of financial or trading data or manufacturing, but the idea is a little bit more geared towards kind of development, things like World Health Organization data, inequality, and that kind of bend to it. At the moment, it's split between coding skills. So for the coding aspect, students are doing a self-directed course in Python for data science. And then the other half of our sessions are geared towards some of the complementary skills. So things such as general computing skills, using Excel, some statistical things, presentation skills, verbally and visually, things like infographics, and some of the ethics issues in data gathering. And that's about a 50-50 split at the moment. We've looked at a few case studies, so things like biased jury selection algorithms, Cambridge Analytica stuff, some of the things in the news, like when the UK government missed a load of COVID data off the end of their Excel spreadsheet because it wasn't long enough. and a lot of stuff that come up kind of week to week. And then it will end in a capstone project. So in project week, students will get a whole week to sort of work on their own project in teams, where there'll be a balance of those who maybe are stronger at coding with those who might be better at data presentation and talking about it. And that will be student directed, and it'll kind of finish with a sort of Dragon's Den or Shark Tank kind of presentation of their findings and their decisions, that I'm hoping to get alumni to sort of be on our panel for, to make it feel a little bit more realistic for them. And the idea is to help them learn to talk about data to people who may not understand data, which I guess is something that I kind of need them to get the idea that they may be technical, but the world around them or not. And if you want to be in politics or you want to be in social science, you need to be able to present these things to anyone, not just your colleagues who know as much as you do. And then in the long run, 2 hours a week is probably not quite enough to do everything we would like. So I do envision kind of a bigger coding section with some more fundamental skills. At the moment, it's very data focused and not just general coding. And if there was more time, if it was a bigger course, then there'd also be an opportunity to kind of look a little bit more into the AI side, which is really important these days. But as it is at the moment, that's probably not going to feature in our course just due to capacity. So definitely still an experiment and a work in progress, but it's been quite exciting so far and going well at the moment. So I think PT's next, if I remembered right, so I'll hand over to him.
Hello, my name's Ed. I'm the music teacher, but I do also have an environmental background, hence why I'm teaching this course, which is kind of the course that I've always wanted to teach. I've started from this idea of uprootedness, and this idea that a more serious disconnect has formed between humans and the rest of nature over the last 100 years, which I think is becoming really acute for the current generation of teenagers. And I'm specifically, as a musician and a writer, I'm really interested in art as a medium for breaking down that barrier between humanity and the rest of nature. Art requires close attention and observation. And I suppose that is the skill I'm focusing on most with the students, the ability to pay attention to the world around them. And it has been my experience, and it's the philosophy of the course, that by paying attention, we learn to love. By looking closely at the tree that we walk past every day, or the liverwort growing in a crack in the castle pavement. And when I did a master's in environmental policy, and as I was doing that, I came to think, well, in a democracy, it's all very well, you can have as many policies as you want, but if people don't want to protect the environment as a first priority, none of those policies are ever going to be taken off the shelf. And so my feeling is that environmental action has to start with getting humans to love the world around them. Too many of our students leave the school shockingly oblivious to what's around them. Wouldn't be able to identify any of the native trees, any of the native plants, wouldn't know the names of any of the constellations above them. And so my aim is to try and use all kinds of different methods to bring the students into a closer connection with the world around them. And the thinking behind that is that this is a transferable toolbox. I don't really want to root all of our students here in South Wales, because that's not much use. They're all going elsewhere in 2 years' time. But to show them how you do this, so that then wherever they are, they can build a close relationship with the world around them. The primary way we're doing this is through journaling. Each of them is producing an almanac over the course of the year. That is a record of everything that has happened in the natural world around them. And I'm hoping that some students will become really obsessed with lichens. Some will find that stars are their passion. Others will think, well, recording the clouds is what I really want to do. And so each of those books would be a very individual approach. In a way, this is going back to the kind of origins of natural history, looking closely at the world around you. We're doing lots of other stuff like identifying plants, learning the names of trees and plants around us, foraging a bit later in the year. There's not much around at the moment. Lots and lots of sketching. I'm going to take them caving when the Welsh government has decided whether caves are indoor or outdoor. Swimming in the sea, night hikes, barefoot walking. On Monday night, we all slept out. It was a full moon and we all went to the woods and slept, which was the most beautiful experience, if quite cold. And lots of poetry, reading lots of poetry and what people have written about the environment. I'm very interested in nature writing. The idea really is to bring all of these things that might traditionally have been seen as bolt-ons or extracurricular activities, to bring them right into the heart of what we're doing, to try and fix this very acute problem of a disconnect from nature. And there's also a bit of a theoretical element whereby we're looking at other systems of relating to the world, looking at environmental philosophy and particularly, I think, North American ways of relating to the rest of the natural world, which I think present a much more healthy picture of that relationship than the Western Enlightenment values. So that's my course. I can't quite remember who I'm handing over to.
Well, technically John, but I don't think John could make it today, so I'll be standing in for him. So John Gregory is our anthropology teacher, and his course, Communication Across Difference, is actually a really good example of how our iterative process has been working, because this is the second year that a course prototype like this is running, but it's actually changed quite a lot while not really changing at the core. So Communication Across Difference is, aiming to combine social science methods, especially ethnography and sociology and all of those research methods that come with the social sciences, like semi-structured interviewing, story gathering, and so on, and then combines that with a creative discipline. So last year, actually, our course ran based on theater, whereas this year we have swapped that component out completely and are trying it with filmmaking. So it's an example of how experimentation can yield us to interesting things, because we might end up with a modular course that could function in all sorts of media, depending on what expertise is at hand in any of the UWCs or wherever these courses go, right? So the idea is really to use film as a medium for social change. The students are gaining experience in social science research, but then also filmmaking, film production, editing, and so on. And so the final product of this will be a community-made documentary, right? And looking at film as a tool for social change. Yeah, so that's Communication Across Difference as a course. I'm going to pass you to Emma, who's going to give you an overview of ocean systems.
Perfect. Thank you, Sylvie. My name is Emma, and I'm the geography teacher at UWC Atlantic. And the thinking behind the Ocean System course is really to reconnect our students back with the ocean. We sit on the second highest tidal range in the world here with the Bristol Channel. So we have a laboratory right on our doorstep, and it would be foolish not to use it more. There are 3 teachers involved with this, and we deliver elements of the course linked with our own specialities. So I'm looking at coastal management as the geography teacher. There's Sov, our chemistry teacher, who has a background in research. She's actually taking the students out on the powerboats this afternoon, so she sends her apologies for not being here. So Sov, our chemistry teacher with a background in research, and Martin, the physics head of science, is also involved. So between us, we bring 3 very different expertise to the course, but as has been mentioned a number of times before, that there's a huge amount of integration and overlapping with what we deliver. As I said, I'm looking at the coastal management section. We have taken all students combined out to the ocean. They've been on the seafront looking at water safety skills. We've been out on their sup boards, looking at life saving, how to flip in a boat, how to find your air pockets, etc. We have done observational walks along the coastline as well to look at micro and macro changes. And this has inspired our students. It was a fantastic start to what is a very new course. And it was just nice for our students to get actually off campus and outside. I think they really appreciated that. So that was our general basic start to the course. With My Coastal Management, we're looking at how we can protect the seafront at the front of the college. My students have been looking at various engineering techniques. We have been looking at the actual engineering report that has already been put forward for how we can protect our college. So we've got a wide variety of skills being used here, from research to presenting, to persuasive, to decision making, to problem solving. And then we're going to be going on to looking at vulnerable populations along our coastline. Sov, as I already have said, is out on the ocean this afternoon with our students. She's looking very much at more practical work in terms of measuring techniques. I think this afternoon they're looking at the depth of the water and turbidity of the water. Martin has already been out on the slipway, as you can see from the photo on the screen, looking at how we can measure gradient of the slipway and utilize tidal energy. So you can see we have a vast range of skills and topics that we're going to be using this year. The plan eventually is for our students to produce a digital portfolio where they can put all their work together combined from this year. And then hopefully in June, we plan to go out for a week onto the West Wales coastline, get out in the powerboats and conduct some more research and do some more project work and looking at future possibilities and decision-making, project-based ideas for how they can implement what they have learned during the year and put it into a real-life situation. So we're very much in our early stages. We're already making changes as we go along, and it's the little things that are inspiring. One of our students last week was just staring out to the sea, and it was lovely to watch, and I went up and had a word with her, and it was the first time she'd ever been at the ocean. So we made her take her shoes and socks off and get in the ocean. So, you know, we think of the big picture, but I think we've also got to look at the smaller pictures as well of what our students are experiencing firsthand, and things that we might take for granted, a whole new events in our students' life. So lots of enthusiasm from the students so far, lots of enthusiasm for the teachers, and we're looking at some of the students have actually volunteered to lead some of the workshops just after Christmas, which is brilliant, absolutely brilliant to see. Okay, thank you. Back to you, Sylvie, I think.
Yes, so I'm gonna cover the last 3 units actually. I'll start with the 2 that are not my own, and then I'll finish on my own course. So one course that's in its first iteration this year is called Narratives for Social Change, Reactivating Our Collective Memory. It's taught by my lovely colleague, Nick, who teaches history and global politics here. And the idea is to use skills from history, but also from, you know, cultural studies, museum curation, discourse analysis, to look at, and also social psychology, to look at how do societies shape their social and collective memory, and how does that memory get flattened over time. So flattened memory in a way is a very sort of one-dimensional view of history, right, where there are heroes and villains, and, you know, things get sort of painted in quite broad brush strokes. And so the students in this course are learning techniques to unflatten that memory, basically, and to, you know, look at primary documents to shake up, you know, what is accepted knowledge of historical events, and to really interrogate, you know, who shapes collective memory, and what is the role of history to, you know, contemporary social challenges, and so on and so forth. They've been doing a bit of work with the Atlantic College archives, and they're also now going to go into a bigger case study where they're looking at the legacy of the Holocaust, which of course is you know, one instance in history that has gone into the global collective memory, so to say, but in very different ways in different countries. Their final project will be a pop-up museum. So the idea is really to also build these skills in terms of how do we communicate memory, how do we complicate narratives, but also then how do we communicate complex narratives? And you know, what is the purpose of memory, and so on and so forth. So that's what they're doing. Now, the next course I'll introduce is Taking a Stance, which is an oral communication course. Jordan Demirov, another history teacher, has a long history of coaching debating as well. So this is really a massively skills-based course, right, where oracy is at the center. They are focusing on oral communication in all sorts of contexts, right? Speech making, debate, campaigning, and so on. And, you know, are doing the good old film yourself with a video camera and analyze your body language, all of that stuff that anybody finds awkward, but particularly teenagers find awkward. But students are finding this immensely helpful. And again, the emphasis is then also on, you know, what do you want to use those skills for? So again, students are working with a variety of organizations to see how they can, you know, contribute to campaigning and so on and so forth. And they're again working towards a sort of capstone Changemaker project. Okay, now last but not least, let's have a look at my own course, which has currently the working title Dialogue, Peace and Social Justice. And again, it sits within the field of social sciences and psychology. And basically the emphasis here is on mindful and generative communication, and also conflict analysis from the very micro level to the macro level. So the course is actually built in a way that we start with interpersonal conflict and then look at how do models of peace and conflict studies apply across different levels of analysis, because you can do a needs-based conflict analysis, whether you look at two people who are thinking of getting a divorce, or whether you're looking at high-level peace talks within an international conflict. Yeah, so we're liaising also with alumni who are experts in the field, whether that is as divorce lawyers or as as higher level diplomats, and alongside this more academic understanding of peace and conflict, my students get some very rigorous training in group facilitation. So if we go to some of the last slides, there's an example. So my course is in its second year. And when we say we want these courses to be relevant and real stakes, my project week in March last year is a very good example of that, I think. So we had a whole week to play with, and 2 days of that week, we had a very experienced facilitator come in who's been working with critical engagement for many, many years. And she gave 2 days of very, very intensive facilitator training. And then on the third day, our students basically got a brief to design a mini conference that we were going to hold at Oasis Refugee Center in Cardiff. And the topic we picked for this mini conference was deliberately not migration, because we wanted something that wasn't, the usual narrative that people present to outsiders that come to visit, but we wanted to look at turning points in life. We wanted to look at dreams for the future and, identity and personal values. So our students designed these workshops. We had a dry run where we basically dress rehearsed, trying these things on each other, giving peer feedback, and then we just threw them in the deep end, went to Cardiff for 2 days and ran this mini conference. And it was amazing to see how professional and how much students were rising to the challenge, because it was quite a challenge. Oasis is a very vibrant community center, but that also means that lots and lots of groups are using it. Our room bookings were messed up. There was building noise. We didn't know which of our participants spoke how much English. Like, it was actually, there were a lot of variables that if we had done something on campus, we could have controlled for, but we just sort of on purpose threw them out into the field in a way where they just had to keep a cool head a little bit, and they did brilliantly. And I think everybody had a really, really rich experience also then to reflect on and learn from. And I think that's sort of what we're aiming at, right? We don't want to just, do these things in a vacuum. We don't want to simulate and play around, but I actually think the best kind of assessment is where the stakes are real world, where you're doing real work for other stakeholders. And so that's sort of the outlook that we're working towards. Obviously, COVID has made this a little bit trickier this year, but that's the idea. So when it comes to questions about how we are going to document this learning and so on, I think a bunch of us have already mentioned portfolio, and I think there is a movement among universities to recognize this sort of less orthodox documentation of learning a lot more. And I think in a way this year has also presented an opportunity in that it set a precedent where university admissions did happen even though exams didn't, for instance, right? So I think that's sort of our next step, and that's also going to be a more UWC-wide conversation as, what will be our way of capturing our students' learning, how do we enable our students to really show how they've developed their skills and understanding and themselves as a person. So that's where we're headed. So I think that's it from our side. So we can look into some questions, I guess.
Thanks very much, Sylvia. And my Zoom quit unexpectedly, so apologies if I've missed some questions, but there's one from Rita. Do you want to ask your question, Rita?
Hi everyone. Can you hear me? Right. I was just wondering how did you select the current students who are undergoing did you call it prototype, or you didn't want to call it a pilot yet? So how were the students identified, and how would future students access or choose these courses when it rolls out finally?
So this year, students filled out a short online application where they could indicate 2 preferences for Changemaker unit, and then we basically had a big roundtable where we tried to place students. And so we placed students obviously with their preferences in mind, but also with, their applications and also their profiles to some degree. So, we made sure every course had some students that had, additional language support, and we made sure that at each course had a variety of national and cultural backgrounds and, previous academic knowledge of whatever the course dealt with and so on. So sometimes we actually offered 3rd choices to candidates, not because they weren't suited to the courses they applied to, but simply because we needed different people, like a variety of people across all the units. How it will work in the future basically depends on a lot of decisions that are yet to be made, but I would assume that, just like with our normal subject selections, there would be conversations with the personal tutor, there would be conversations around, what is their thing and what do they want to work towards when it comes to maybe coming up with a capstone project they want to do after graduation and so on. And to then, compile some of these modules together into a pathway in some shape or form. Yeah, so that's roughly the idea.
Thank you.
If I could pick up from some of the points Sylvie's made, one of the beauties of the IB, at least when I came into it, is one has 2 years to teach the subject that you're teaching towards the summative exams at the end. But that also, in a way, is its greatest challenge, because historically, if you couldn't make a course fit 2 years with diversity of assessment, et cetera, it wouldn't make it past the drawing table in terms of being offered. And as Sylvie highlighted, what we want about these courses is they're interdisciplinary, skills-based, and not necessarily time-bound. So in imagining how a student might put together a future package within their IB, it's that they could take a number of these modules as equivalent to a standard level course, for example. So they may last for 3 months or 6 months or a year, or perhaps 2, that we're not so bound by that time. But that in a lot of subjects, the core skills, especially in the humanities, I would say, that you want to teach students, especially with case studies, can be at least introduced with a case study. You don't need to do 6 to develop those core skills. So it's really that aspect that we're experimenting with as well, and we're pitching to the IB. So we're going in, working within the framework of the IB, and I think we feel they'll be quite receptive to modified diplomas. They already have something called the Careers Pathway as an alternative to the IB diploma. So we're quite encouraged with that, and just at the UWC international level, we've identified curriculum reform as our #1 priority as a movement. So we're not working alone in this as well. There's a UWC educators network that Sylvie's and others are active participants are. So we're using the collective resource of the 18 UWC schools and colleges to try and drive this forward. So Tanya, you have a question. It's a secret question. I don't know what it is, so please ask away.
Thank you, Peter. No, it's not really secret. I just didn't know how to phrase it. So I thought it'd be easier just to explain. Yeah, thank you very much for rerunning this talk. I had to leave the other one suddenly, and it's amazingly inspiring. It's like quite emotional hearing all of this. So thank you, everybody. My question is for Edward, and definitely this topic is covered in a lot of the other subjects that you that you've told us about today. But I just wanted to ask the question in the context of the actual connecting students to the environment and policies around environmental or global policies around, you know, the environment that we're facing in today's world. You mentioned that you're looking at indigenous interpretations within the North American community and their relationship with the land. And we have just this week had a Zoom with the 1984 African alumni, and we had a large discussion around the coloniality issues and the dispossession of land that occurred during the colonial process, and how that has affected local government as well as local communities' feelings towards a lot of environmental global policies. And so although it sounded to me as though you're going to look at how Indigenous people relate to their environment, I was just wondering if you were going to bring that into the inequality that exists today and how environmental policies are perceived by some populations because of inequality as being beneficial to the West and not to the Indigenous population. So that's a bit of a, I don't know if I phrased that very well. It's a kind of decoloniality of your sense of being and how you interpret your relationship to the land based on decolonial principles. And I just wondered if you were going to bring that into your course. Sorry, it's a very flowery question. So it wasn't a secret. I just had no idea how to type that.
I'm not sure I have much idea how to answer it. I'll do my best. I think that the political dimensions of that question are somewhat outside what I'm aiming to do with the course. And yet I think when I have a few particular things in mind. There's one very, very beautiful paper called The Circumpolar Night's Dream that details the beliefs of the Ojibwa people, who I think live on the border, what is now the border between Canada and the US. I think that as we read those things, the students cannot help but have an empathetic response. As these roots develop, the idea that all around the world, colonialism has uprooted people and that environmental policies in the current day may continue to do the same, even if they are well-meaning. But the political aspects of that, I don't really feel equipped myself to deal with. I'm sure that that will come up in the discussion, but that's not quite the main focus of my course, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Yes, it does make sense. I was just questioning the awareness that it may come up, and that it's not something I don't think anybody has an answer to, but just an awareness of that sense of being and sense of being with nature that has been influenced. So it was more awareness, and you answered my question. Thank you so much.
There's also, I mean, there have been conversations because, of course, you know, every year we have slightly different staff, and then also more UWCs are joining in this, you know, experimentation phase. So there's a lot of potential for more land-based courses to grow. There has been a lot of talk about a course on food systems, for example, which would, you know, encapsulate probably some form of permaculture qualification based in the Valley with a more policy and politics focused systems analysis. And I think there, of course, coloniality would become one of the things to interrogate. So I think, yeah, it's in the cloud of thinking somewhere at the moment. It's certainly in my cloud of thinking. Yeah.
And I've just, you know, as an example of this, I've just read an amazing book called Strandloper by Alan Garner, a British author, about a man called William Buckley. It's a true story, who went and he escaped from a British prison colony in Australia and integrated into an Aboriginal society. And the moment where the British come down on the Aboriginal people is just heart-wrenching, like so appalling, to put their sheep in the place where these people have been living. And so I hope this will give us a kind of different appreciation. You know, when you approach these things through art, they can be so powerful. So I guess it would be an artistic approach, probably more than the political one.
Thanks, Tanya. Any other curious questions out there? We can probably take the presentation off so we can see more people. I can't see anybody. There we go, in all our glory. But as I hope you can tell, I mean, we have exceptional staff here, we have exceptional students here, and for me, that leveraging the assets we have, and also an exceptional campus for those of you who know the college. So putting that all together in this grand experiment, I think is a no-brainer. And I think it's really energized this year, particularly with COVID, knowing we had this as sort of a silver lining, an opportunity, as Sylvie said, because we can't do the normal outreach, that's freed up time in the students' schedule, because I think, going back to my earlier point, time is the most precious commodity. And I'm also incredibly hopeful with, you know, the mental health concerns that are very much a part of education today, that the meaning behind these courses and getting out more into nature and onto campus will help address that challenge that we're facing as well. So my sense from the students I've spoken with who are part of this pilot, UWC students love being part of something new. They are recruited because they want to be difference makers in the world. And I think this is the opportunity when they're here to really be making a difference while students. So in a way, we're getting more return on investment on those students, that we're leveraging their talents and passions while they're here at the college. And then the other somewhat related program that you may have heard about is Lighthouse, which is sort of an ideas hub that we have 2 Lighthouse interns, and they're working very closely with the Changemaker team to help support student ideation around projects they can have coming out of this, ideas they can have as well. So there's lots of really exciting things happening at the college right now in this field.